Jeffro from Two Hacks Garage. Well, it's a super early morning, back in Jimmy's shop working on Project Jumping Jack Flash, soon to be nostalgia front engine dragster. We got a whole lot of work to do to get this thing completed, but we've been really tackling a lot of the small things to get this chassis done. I'm going to be taking this thing here probably towards the end of the month and getting it painted, well, getting it blasted first and then painted so we can start assembling this thing. Still waiting on a whole bunch of parts I ordered, one of them being the front axle, one of them being the spindle mounts and all that type of stuff. But for now, we're focusing on getting everything welded up and built on this chassis. Reason being is before we paint it, we got to make sure everything on here has been finish welded, any little bracket, any little tab, all that fun jazz is on here. So Jimmy and I are putting our heads together. We're going over everything, checking all the welds, and just building as we go to make sure this chassis is done. So this video here, well, it's back on the small things. And what are those small things? Brainstorming. We're brainstorming as we go along this thing, making sure we do have everything welded, making sure we have any bracket, any mount, anything like that done. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to get a chassis done, or you think it's done, paint it and realize, oops, I missed something, have to sand and have to spot paint. The paint doesn't always look good that way. So in this video, it is tackling literally a lot of the small things. The welding, maybe little pieces here, maybe little brackets. I just talked to Jimmy. He's inside eating breakfast of a couple things we need to build out on this thing. One of them being a battery tray mount, one of them a mount for a rear tail light, and all that little fun stuff. So yeah, like I said in previous videos, I know it seems like a lot of videos on this and we're showing everything, but I just want to document, if you want to call it, and capture everything we're doing that goes into building one of these dragsters. It is a lot of work. When I first came into this, I didn't realize how much work it was going to be, but you know what? I like the challenge. I like learning, and you know what, guys? This has been a whole fun project so far. Pretty soon, though, you're going to see this thing, hopefully, in some nice paint. Not really sure what color yet. We were looking at going with metal flake red. However, there is a cost associated with that, and on top of it, the availability of what I need isn't quite there right now. So it might be a different color. That's neither here nor there. We still, like you saw in yesterday's video, we did rough form a seat. We still got to do the bottom. Reason we rough formed it is because we needed to get the Zeus fasteners in there correctly, and we started tackling a bunch of the small stuff, finished welding on the bottom. Saw us flipping it over a lot and all that. Yeah, we got a whole lot going on, guys. There is a method to our madness, and you know what? I'm pretty excited about it. Pretty soon, we're going to be assembling the engine for this. I'm not going to tell you the cubic inches, but it's going to be pretty healthy, very high compression. Reached out to a whole bunch of my friends and had discussions on camshaft and a whole bunch of other fun jazz like that we'll go into much later on when we start assembling that. So there's a whole lot to come on this. It seems like all the videos have been on the chassis, which there is a lot of work. That's the most time-consuming part. But yeah, you know what, guys? Super early. I'm still kind of tired from yesterday. We got a whole day's worth of work. We got a whole day's worth of work tomorrow. So with that, guys, what we're going to do is we're going to get started on Project Jumping Jack Flash. More of the fun things with the little things later. All right, before we get started, kind of what I'm talking about is if we add a bunch of these tabs everywhere, like this is going to be for seatbelt. Obviously, these are the Zeus fastener tabs. You got stuff here like the parachute mount. A lot of times what we do is we tack stuff into place and weld on which sides we can get to. Then when we flip things over, we go back and finish weld. So what we're doing is we're going through every single weld all the way down and seeing if we miss anything and get it welded in place, or if we miss any fasteners or anything like that. We do know now, just by brainstorming, if you look, we got the Zeus fasteners there. That's going to be a panel for the bottom, but we do need to put more up here because we have to have a panel that's going to cover the bottom of the engine. There's some different rules on that, and we're going to need a panel up front. So what we're doing now is literally just going over everything and making sure all of our welds are right, finished, and all that fun jazz. With that, it's time to get to work. And if you look here, the odd shape of this chassis, it's not actually bent. That's the way it was made. It's pretty neat. I'll explain more on that when the car's done. Later. All right, so this is why we go over things more than one time. In a previous video, we made the crankcase ventilation system that actually goes through the chassis and vents out the back, which will go into a puke tank. It's a sealed system once you get the whole frame welded up, and our front ones are here. These go from the valve covers, goes to the tube. Like I said, in a previous video, we showed you how that actually works and what we're going to do. The one thing when we did make this, the chassis was sitting flat, and one thing that we needed to do was you actually need to make drains. So if there's anything that gets captured in that puke tank or runs forward, you can actually drain in the bottom. So this is why you go over things multiple times. We have it on its side. Might as well do it now. We're actually going to drill holes in the actual chassis, put in some pipe there, and we're having it threaded because we'll put these little 1/8-inch stainless pipe plugs in there. So theoretically, and Jimmy's done this, if anything is in this tube that doesn't get captured in the back puke tank and runs forward, you can actually drain the chassis. Pretty neat idea. So that's what we're working on now. See you soon. All right, so here's the theory behind that, the drains we were talking about. Like I said, everything's vented with the tubes coming out of the chassis. And so you see here that these are welded in place. They're super hot, they're threaded, and they'll get those little 1/8-inch Allen pipe plugs that'll go in there. So if anything that doesn't collect in the puke tank that we're going to fabricate in the back, since this all goes forward, you can just jack it up in the back, and anything that's in there will drain out. After talking to Jimmy about this a little bit, his old dragster, when he had this in there, actually nothing ever came out, but it's just the last 4 dragsters he had this set up, and actually nothing ever came out of it, but just in case, it's nice to have.
And the older.
All right, so what we got going on here now, Jimmy went through and we looked at all our welds, found a couple more welds that we needed to take care of. So as far as like the tabs, any tubing that connects here in the chassis, it is all welded. Same with our vent pipes for the evac system. All our tabs are welded. Everything has been welded. Previous videos, what we did is we made our shifter mount, brake mount, fuel or our throttle, the go-go fast pedal mount, all that. But one thing we needed to do is this thing has to have a battery. No, you don't start it off a battery inside the car. That's something different we're going to tackle down the road. But you have to have a battery for the trans brake and the shifter. Those are electronically controlled. So this car is going to run.
Shifter, shift light.
Yes. Shifter, shift light, and tranny brake. These things are, the ignition is controlled by magneto, so that just gets grounded, makes its own electricity. So what you do is you get a small battery. I picked up a 12-volt 70 cca motorcycle battery. That's going to be enough to control all of the electronics that we have on this car, which is actually extremely minimal, but you have to have a tray. So what Jimmy and I are doing is we measure the transmission. We know where it sits in the car, and we know where to put a plate where it's going to be out of the way. Really tiny, really efficient for what we have. So now what we need to do is we need to fabricate just a little plate in here so that gets into place. Down the road, we'll put a box in there and all that. But for the purposes of what we're trying to do of getting this chassis done and ready to paint, we need to get that plate into place. I do have a list over here. Nice whiteboard. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a list of stuff we still need to do the chassis, like lower chute mount, steering shaft pinion support we got to build, chassis steering rod supports, which go down the side, frame drains, they're done, the battery tray, we're getting that done, and weld the steering shaft coupler. So that's what we know now that we need to do to complete this chassis. With that, I'm rambling. Jimmy's taking a phone call right now. So what I'm going to do is I got some parts that I took off of here that I've been sandblasting, and because I have some pieces that we're going to use for the paint we're using and test it out. Before we lay it down on anything, I'm going to go the safe route, and pieces that I know that can be easily remade and cheaply without being connected to the chassis, I'm going to go ahead and test that paint out on that. That way, we'll see how it turns out, make sure it's good before I paint the chassis. With that, I'm rambling. It's time to get to work. See you in a few. All right, so there we go. Jimmy went ahead and made this plate out of chromoly and cut it into form, measure size of the battery. We made sure the transmission was going to fit in there, taking measurements of that, and he's got that welded into place. So that's all said and done. So we have our battery tray in there. I'm going to get a box where the battery will sit in there. Like I showed you, it's real small. But what we got working on next now is you see here, and you see here, those are the top mounts for the wheelie bar. However, there has to be one place at the bottom. It's a triangulated wheelie bar, and at the bottom, one arm comes out and the 2 points go to the top. So we're going to work on fabbing that up and getting that completed. You know what, guys? It's a lot of progress. Like I said, there's a lot of little things that go into these chassis. We just need to make sure we get it all tackled before we paint it. With that, I'm rambling. Jimmy's over there working. I better get to helping. All right, so now we got the lower wheelie bar mount in. The ones on top were already there. We left those alone. We ended up having to redo that one because when it was on the car, it was actually damaged. So I'm going to end that video here. We got a whole lot more stuff to do. But for now, that's what we got going on. We did go over the chassis many times, and we'll actually do another once over per se on getting all that, making sure all the welds are done. Like I said, we still got quite a bit to do. If you saw Jimmy and I in the time lapse earlier, we actually got the wheelie bar out that came with this car. One of the rods is bent. The heim joints are junk. The welds are crap. So the bottom bar, we're actually going to reuse that, but the other ones are going to remake. Ordered some heim joints, so we got to redo all that fun stuff. But yeah, it's getting there. Got our whiteboard of fun stuff, parts to get ordered, parts that are ordered.
And we had 3/8 heim joints.
And lower,
a mixture of 3/8 and half-inch heim joints on a wheelie bar, which is not cool.
Yeah, it was a mess. That old wheelie bar was a mess. So we got some wheelie bar fabrication. But as you see here, here's some parts that are ordered, some parts we need to order. And we got stuff here that needs to be fabbed up. With that, guys, I'll see you in the next one.